Why?
design build stuff, and I know the construction department's done some design
It was
build.
flooded out
So I'm going
last
to
year,
also
so
grab some of the other contracts our
utilize it.
office has approved for those, and I should be able to. I know that that's more of a direct. Those are going to be direct with the design builder
We're trying
contracts
to
as opposed to
transfer
the
the
sponsored
points
one.
or whatever.
But they should also
The Big
reference some of
Island,
those special
Sea
statutes
Volcano
and some of the
National
different
Park,
kind of the unique
some
things that relate to
sites.
design build. So those will be a good reference too, in addition to the CMAR. So I appreciate you sending me that.
to go to Oahu. Probably could do that if we wanted to see the Arizona. And
Yeah, well, I want to do
I
it.
was thinking about it.
Okay, and then I should have because that's
Taking a boat,
what's happening. Open the
go around all the islands and spend
Possible.
the cruise, that'd be nice.
I don't know how expensive it is, but, and you know, really, we like to squat one place and play golf.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, we know though that
Chairman.
ultimately somebody's going to want to do this. So it's a matter of time.
One could take a chair or be seated. I'd like to start this meeting off with a Happy New Year to everyone. And
Happy New Year to you.
And I know that we have the greatest weather, so 2020, how could it be better right now? With that, I call this meeting to order, and we will call on Commissioner Purcell for a roll call, please.
Larry Zucker, Chairman.
Here.
Kellen Lancaster, Vice Chairman.
Here.
Mike Purcell, Secretary. Here. Gerald Geis.
Here.
Clinton Glick.
Excused.
Ron Cayley.
Here.
Mark Cott.
Here.
Sheridan Little.
Here.
Rodney Wagner. Here. Bill Yankee. Here. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
With that, thank you. Next item of business here is we will start with our audience introduction. If we could start on that end of the table.
Glenn Moniz, Senate District 10.
John Eklund, House District 10.
Dan Larson, House District 25 up in Powell.
Lisa Anselmi Dalton, Senate District 12 in Rock Springs, Sweetwater County.
Rod Wagner, Wyoming Water Development Commissioner, District 12.
Bill Yankee, Water Development Commissioner, Division 3.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Larry Zucker, Water Development Commission, District 2.
Gerald Geis, District 3, Bighorn Basin, Fremont County. Mike Purcell, I'm the at-large member.
Mark Cott, District 4.
Ron Cayley, District 1.
Andrew Coleman, Attorney General's Office.
Nancy Kastner, Water Development.
Jody Preen, Water Development.
Steve Wolf, State Engineer's Office.
Barry Lawrence, Water Development.
Jason Mead, Water Development.
Colt Lodeman, LID.
Travis Ford, HDR Engineer.
Dimitri Katz, HDR Engineer.
Pete Roush, Respect Consultant. Bill Jargell, LID.
Brad Brooks, City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities.
Jody Pavlica, Water Development Office.
Greg Kerr, UW Office Water Programs.
Chase Valley Water Development Office. Mitch Scott, Newark Tribal Water Engineer's Office.
Tony Bergantino, Water Resources Data System.
Mike Robertson, Water Development Office.
Mabel Jones, Water Development Office.
Tony Rutherford, Water Development Office.
That concludes our audience.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We
Jody?
have someone listening in, and could you all please make sure you use your microphones so we can hear everything? And Katie's listening in, so just be good, all of you.
She'll get on us if we're not. I'm sure of that. And hi, Katie. Are you really out there? Okay. All right, we'll move on with our financial report. And is that our director, Brandon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the financial report. This is the same report that we've seen several times now. I guess in general, water development account, the balance prior to the upcoming appropriations at that, as of October, is $56,052,372. Account 2 was $15,661,746. And account 3 was $63,209,051.
Any questions for Brandon on that report? If not, we'll move on to review public hearings, proposed level 3 projects.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. This is kind of an update on the public hearings that we conducted around the state. Our hearing officers attended 16 public hearings. We did receive some comments. All of the comments were positive towards the projects. We did receive one written comment, also positive for the projects. And we heard many thanks to the commission for your support in their operations. And I could go into further detail if you would like, but that's your pleasure.
What's the commissioner's interest to go any deeper with that? Any questions? on any
Mr.
of
Chairman,
that?
I think if we had some issues with some of our recommendations, then we should in fact delve into those. But the fact of the matter is that we seem to be doing just fine with our sponsors and the public right now, so I think we can defer and move on.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner Purcell. We'll move on to project application updates then, and we will, I bet Barry Lawrence got something to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the November meeting, we were asked to further expand on, we had 2 recommendations going forward, which were approved by the commission for cloud seeding for next winter of 2021, both in Medbo, Sierra Madres, and in the Wind River Range. When we discussed those recommendations in November, one of the things that came up was we'd like to have a little bit more information relative to cost per acre foot generated, what we think, projections for that, and how's that compare to water, for instance, water sales in this case, Fontenelle was specifically mentioned. And so had an individual ask us to bring that back, and so we've prepared this, or actually Julie did prepare this memo. Julie's head of our weather modification program, does a great job, and she's prepared this memo, and we'll kind of walk you through it here a little bit. Basically, we want to let's start and talk about the Medicine Bow and Sierra Madre Mountains. That's where we had the large research project, or the bulk of the research project was done in those 2 mountain ranges. And we also, after that research project, did a follow-up design, feasibility and design study, to actually put the pieces, parts on the ground. How should it look and feel, that type of thing, the blueprint for the program. So that built on the research. And so this comes out of that design study. And so we're talking about cloud seeding over the Medbos and Sierra Madres based on 1 aircraft for seeding delivery. And I will tell you that we have 1 aircraft here based in Cheyenne right now at the airport. And it has flown some missions, and I'll give you that update here in a second. But so for the basins affected, well, obviously we're seeding Medbo, Sierra Madres, and so the basins affected would be the North Platte River Basin and then the Little Snake River Basin, west slope of the Sierra Madres. If you were to look at that, and it comes down to seeding effect, and if you remember our research study showed anywhere between a 5 to 15% seeding effect, with say 10% being the sweet spot, which is certainly achievable from our scientists that were involved in that study, and then in the follow-up design study, which is done by the National Center for Atmospheric Research. If we were to look at 10% seeding effect on those 2 mountain ranges, we'd be looking at an additional average acre foot per year of 32,000 acre feet of water. And that would be increases above normal. So cost per acre foot based on the cost for the program come right at about $11 per acre foot for water. And we think that's very favorable. Obviously, if you were to achieve a 15% seeding effect, and when we're talking about seeding effect here, we're talking about increases in snow water equivalent. And that was actually in the robust science that was done. They routed that. They actually did the hydrology models and so forth to route it. Came out to like 1.8% additional stream flow in the system. But that having been said, those are the acre foot per year additional gains we think we are achieving for the program and what the cost per acre foot of our program is, if you do the numbers. I will tell you, relative to that program in the Medbos Sierra Madres, as I mentioned, we have aircraft here now. They have had 12 airborne missions this year already. And one of those was in the Laramie Range, and we'll talk a little bit about operations in the Laramie Range, which has since been suspended. We'll talk a little bit about that. We also had 2 missions. If you remember, the plane also flies down into Colorado, being paid for by the Colorado Water Conservation Board and the Jackson Conservancy District down there out of Walden. And plane, when there's no seeding events possible here, conditions aren't right here, then the plane can take off if conditions are right into Colorado, and they seed the western flanks of the Never Summer Range in Colorado. Headwaters to the upper North Platte, so it's beautiful. So great arrangement there, and they pay for those flights into Colorado. Plane's still based here, but we have priority use of the plane, obviously. Anyway, so there's been 2 missions down into Colorado with that same aircraft. 12 airborne missions. So going forward, if you flip the page here, let's talk about the Wind River Mountain Range a little bit. And here we're talking ground-based seeding, okay? Not aircraft, we're talking about ground-based. And one of the reasons for that, I think most of you remember, that was part of the big, large research project that we conducted. And when we dismantled the program to go operational, at that time, the lower basin of the Colorado River Basin asked that we maintain those generators, not take them out of the field, leave them there. They wanted those operational, and that's when we started our cost share with the lower basin of the Colorado. So those 10 generators are still in place, 9 on the western flanks of the Wind River Range, and there's 1 on the eastern flank over there south of Lander. Those are still operational and in place. But to look at additional, hydrology there, additional runoff we think we're creating, and if you were to do some transference of results from the large research project, which was very conservative, a 1.8% increase in runoff, if it were applied there, comes out to about 16,000 acre feet. And what we're talking about here, 16,000 additional acre feet of water, that's on the Green River Basin side. We're not even looking at the Wind River side. Obviously, there's significant benefits there. We're asked to look at this. We don't have the robust hydrology right now that, as part of the research that was done for the winds, they didn't do the robust hydrology of the winds. The focus was on the Medbos and Sierra Madres, so these are the best numbers we have. That having been said, the University of Wyoming, the Water Research Program through Greg Kerr manages, they're working on that. The Department of Atmospheric Science actually has a project right now to get us those robust numbers on the winds like we have for the Medbos and Sierra Madres, so they are working on that. But given this proposed, what we think we can achieve, additional runoff 16,000 acre feet in the Green River Basin, if you were to look at the cost of the program, our proposed contract for next year is $525,000. You're looking at additional cost of the water of about $33 per acre foot. Now keep in mind this is ground-based, so you might say, well, why is that more than over the Medbos Sierra Madres? Medbos Sierra Madres, we've got aircraft. So there are more opportunities. You can get that plane, position it when those storms come in, you can get right in cloud. So there's more opportunities, cost of water goes down for the same contract. 16,000 acre feet is what we think there. I will tell you relative to ground-based operations in the Wind River Range to date, we've had 9 events over there. We had 3 in November, 3 in December, and 3 in January. And just to remind everybody, this program is being cost shared in the Wind River Range with the folks in the lower basin. When I say lower basin, that's Central Arizona, Southern Nevada, and also the 6 Agency Committee, California, as well as we have local partners there. Green River Rock Springs Joint Powers Water Board is a new partner for us, Rocky Mountain Power, and we have 4 Trona firms also kicking in. Okay, and I failed to mention in the Medbos Sierra Madre program, we now have the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities who are assisting us greatly and kicking in as well in that program. So that's the operations to date. I've run through what we think projections are for additional runoff, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason real quick, and he's going to talk to you about comparison with Fontenelle, unless you had anything to add. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. I think we might have asked last meeting that we could get a breakdown on other entities that are, how much money they're given.
Okay, sure, I can give you that. In the case of the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities, it's $45,000 this year. Okay, or in the case of in the Green River operations, as I said, the split, the actual funding split, and I can get you the exact dollars and cents, but the actual funding split it's a 63-37 split. Okay, in other words, right now as it stands, water development is paying 63% of the money, whereas I've got it flipped. 63%, is being paid for by the lower basin, and 37% is Wyoming at this time. Okay, and when I say that, the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Powers Board is $5,000. Rocky Mountain Power is $5,000. And then the other 4 Trona firms each are kicking in $3,000, up to $12,000. Okay? Thank you.
I also have a question. Are these reports shared with the entities that are help support the program?
Mr. Chairman, you're talking about our funding partners?
Yeah.
Yes. And all of our operational reports for the airborne and the ground-based are online. Going back, we've got about 5 years built up in the Wind River Range. All those ground-based operational reports are online, as well as 1 year of operations airborne in the Medbos Sierra Madres. Remember, last year was our first year with the aircraft in the Medbos Sierra Madres.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. Barry, how do you arrive at these estimates? Is there any quantifiable way you can, these are all estimates based on 5, 10, and 15%?
Mr.
How do you
Chair,
arrive at that?
yes. Mr. Chairman, through the results of the randomized experiment that was run, it was a double crossover experiment conducted by the National Center for Atmospheric Research. They came up with that. They had bodies of evidence, different ways of looking at it. They run what they call the ensemble and the model suite of runs, multiple runs, looking at all the precip data and everything. And they knew our seeding events. They knew the timing. They knew when the increases in precip. They had high resolution precipitation gauges out there. Through all that, they came up with potential increases. Okay, through, what could we affect? Microphysical changes in those clouds, what could we affect in the additional SWE, in the snow, okay? But then you're not done. Then you've got to route it, obviously. And so we had, actually, Dr. Glenn Tootle with the University of Wyoming at the time was involved with that through the Water Research Program and so forth, and actually routed that, did the hydrology to figure out what could be expected. But the National Center for Atmospheric Research felt 5 to 15%, because obviously, it's a dynamic process. We're talking storms here, so, that are rolling through and so forth. So it's not absolute, but these are really robust numbers, and I will tell you that the rest of the western states certainly looked at what we did, and they felt very credible and very conservative, very conservative. If anything, we underestimated what we could do.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Where could we get that data? Where is that data available?
It's online, Mr. Chairman.
Online?
Yeah, the peer-reviewed scientific journal is online, and through our website, our agency website.
Water Development Commission's website,
Yes.
we can get that data.
Yes.
Any additional questions for Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to our head of our dam and reservoir section. He'll talk to you a little bit about Fontenelle water. That was the other piece that we were asked to look at.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, on the back of that memo that Barry handed out under Table 3 is where the Fontenelle information is. Just to preface this, it's a bit difficult to try to compare what we pay for a reservoir versus what we're paying for cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is not making water. You can't make water, but you're squeezing more water out of the clouds. Reservoir, you're just storing the water. So it's a bit of apples and oranges comparison, but nevertheless, for the request. The first thing we looked at was we've got 2 contracts with the Bureau of Reclamation that we signed in 1962, and the second one was in 1974. Each contract was for 60,000 acre feet out of the reservoir. The first contract in 62 was significantly cheaper than the second contract, and it was because it was based on the estimate for construction at the time. Construction started, I think, in 1961 and went through 64. And then the second contract, so the first contract was $900,000 for 60,000 acre feet. The second contract in 1974 considered actual construction costs, as well as we know, they had some issues the first time they filled it, and some seepage, and all the work they had to do to fix that went into that second contract as far as construction costs, plus the interest from when they built the reservoir till 1977, so a number of years of interest. So that second 60,000 acre feet of water, we had to pay $11,410,000 for, and that was over a 40-year term. The initial $900,000 was a 50-year term. So and I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, I apologize. One's paid off, one's almost paid off. So if we average those two together based on what we charged or were charged through those contracts for that 120,000 acre feet, we get to the $172.10. You can kind of consider that as a more or less our portion of the capital construction cost of the reservoir. The second row is, of course, Tony Rutherford here at our office and our division in water and dams and reservoirs has been looking at rip-wrapping the bottom portion of Fontenelle Reservoir. That came out of the governor's water strategy. And based on that, if you look at what that would cost in today's dollars to complete that in the wet with the reservoir full or mostly full, we're looking at roughly $205 an acre foot for that capital construction cost to place that riprap. So then we also, as part of our contracts on the 120,000 acre feet, we have to pay a proportionate share of the annual operation and maintenance and replacement costs that the Bureau of Reclamation sees every year. So with that, I took the past 14 years of invoices that we've received and what we paid to the Bureau of Reclamation and averaged those out Again, spreading them out over that 120,000 acre feet, and that came to about $2.24 per acre foot per year in O&M costs. And then the last exercise I went through was just simply, we have a number of contracts with entities such as Pacificor, readiness to serve contracts. If Colorado River ever went into curtailment and they can't draw out of the Green River, then they would look to take water from those contracts out of Fontenelle Reservoir. And with those contracts, we've recently created a new template when new customers come to us looking for a contract, and we updated the purchase amount based on consumer price index, so it's current. And then we also look at a readiness to serve charge. So that would cost somebody that wanted to buy water from the state of Wyoming from one of their contracts $10 for the readiness to serve per acre foot, and then if they took delivery of that water, it'd be $71 per acre foot. So it's up to you now to compare that with cloud seeding. But those are the numbers that we could put together. So any questions on the Fontenelle numbers?
Yes.
The 17210, that's not acre foot per year, that's just total acre foot. That's our total investment divided by the 120,000. So it's not acre foot per year. Where Barry above is talking about acre foot per year. So that's the reason that the first two columns look high, is that they are in fact, that's total cost rather than acre foot per year.
I would add, Mr. Chairman, again, that was built in the 1960s. If you were to build that today, they'd be significantly higher than what they are here, so.
I guess the reason I brought it up is you looked at Barry's prices at cost per acre foot per year. And then we look at these costs and it's just gross acre feet for our total investment.
That's right, and I included the interest that was associated with that loan that we paid off or have been paying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jason on the Fontenelle?
We'll provide that, Mr. Chairman, to the Select Water Committee on Friday, or at least to Chairman Hicks, who requested it in the first place, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the report, Jason. We'll move on to LaPrille, I guess, in LaPrille Irrigation District Rehabilitation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll kind of set this up, and then I will let the smart people take over for me.
Yeah, chair, if you'd like, come on up.
If you remember, in November, we had some amendments to the existing LaPrille rehabilitation project. In November, we made an amendment to change the scope of work from the original scope to more analysis on the dam structure itself. And that was a result of some of the findings of the initial work that was being done. So we amended the scope language in the contract, but kept the dollar amount the same. That removed some of the work that was originally intended, and at that time, we said that we would place that money back in another amendment, which is what we're talking about today, of about $150,000. At that time, we also brought to you that we would have a to be determined amount that would be for additional work on the project that is a result of the recommendations that came out of that investigation. Since that time, a lot of work has been accomplished, and the work that is being presented to us is still coming in the door. There's still analysis that they're doing. But in 1 month, an amazing amount of work has occurred. And so our request today, our recommendation, and I'll let Jason Colt kind of educate you on where we are with it, but our recommendation is for the $150,000 and then an additional $500,000. So a total recommendation is $650,000 to continue the project. And where we're going with this, it's a little bit still up in the air. We're trying to figure out what the issues are and what the path forward is. And that is still evolving as we sit here today. But the intent of this recommendation is to keep the project going until as far as we can with this appropriation, and you'll hear more as to why we want to do that. So I'll kind of let Chase give you an update on where we are in the project, and it kind of sheds light on where we think we're heading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. In November, we did change the direction of our existing level 2 to do a little better structural analysis of the dam itself. We were trying to figure out if they had a local issue on one buttress or if there was a global issue with the entire structure. You approved that. Starting December 4th or 5th, I believe, the consultant team hit the dam, got on the ropes, and did a physical look with ropes, hanging off of ropes. They used a drone to fly around to look for cracks and other deformities, things like that. All this work was done, and within a month, 2 days ago, we received a 457-page report. It turns out that this is a global issue. It's not local. There's 2 other buttresses that have significant damage. There's a lot of cracks. Some are in a diagonal, which is a shear force, which is dangerous and concerning to the team. They cored out concrete in 4 different locations and found that the ends of the concrete cores were actually crumbling away, so the section is actually smaller than it would be. And the compression test shows very weak concrete, much weaker than you would expect. The bottom line is quoting what came out of the report, the dam is reaching or has reached the end of its useful life. They're recommending major stability enhancements to this dam. Currently, we're reviewing this report. It's an internal review, so we're not releasing it. I have to sit down with Brandon and Barry and then eventually the consultants to see where we're going next. This is very dynamic, fluid, in motion types of things. That's all I have.
Chairman, question. What's the 500,000 for then? Is it just to continue the analysis and compensate for the work that's been done, or?
Mr. Chairman, the original thought of the to be determined, the 500,000, was that we would have a little clearer path forward. With the results of what they're finding, that path is muddied a little bit, so it is just an amount of money that the 3 of us, Chase, Barry, and I, decided to keep the project going. We think that it's a high hazard dam. We think that the project does need to go. We just threw a number of 500,000.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to add that if there are questions, we do have the engineering team here. They can expand on anything. They will be here today and likely not here for the rest of the week. So if we do have technical questions, now would be a good time to ask those.
Chairman, over here, thank you. I would have some questions. How old is the dam, and do we have, it doesn't look that old, is kind of when I'm looking at the pictures, so I'm curious why we're having these problems, or do we know why we're having the problems? Is it on a fault line, or if we did rebuild the thing, would it same thing happen rather quickly? But first, the age of it, I'm curious about that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Colt Rodeman, LID. The dam was commissioned in 1909. Okay? So, 110 years old. It's not built on a fault line. That's part of the stuff that was done prior to rock hazard analysis and stuff like that. Pete Roush, with respect, he can talk further to that. I'll just let you trade.
Mr. Chairman, Pete Roush with respect. Would you like expansion on what Colt said? Do you have a further question?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like an idea of what we're going to find out with the $500,000 that we're putting into it. Do you have ideas now as to whether it's going to need to be completely rebuilt or whether it can be reinforced? You said it was at the end of its life. So's our interstate highway system's at the end of its life, and it keeps on getting repaired. I'm just curious what we do with dams when you say that.
Mr. Chairman, with this dam and when we're saying end of its useful life, of course, results and everything that we've found so far is still preliminary, and we are finalizing those results. Subcontractor HDR really doing a great job working through that. With the nature of this dam and being a high hazard dam, the nature of the issues that we're seeing, and really the potential consequence of what end of life means for this dam, ultimately it could mean catastrophic failure. And where we're headed with it is very likely looking at significant rehabilitation or replacement, retrofit. Talking with the dam engineers at HDR and similar style of dam, it's called slab and buttress, Amberson style. It was relatively common across the country, and at that time, the time that this one was built, and the majority of those still standing have been retrofitted. In talking with the engineers at HER and state engineer, a likely retrofit to this style of dam is ultimately to fill in the open face with concrete. And so back to your question, the $500,000 that we've set aside or asking to set aside would be to really evaluate what is the best and most economical alternative for prolonging the life of this dam. What can we get out of it? What can be done, and what would the cost to do that be? Compare the economics. We also need to be looking at, any long-term fix for this dam is likely years out. And how does the irrigation district manage the risk in the meantime? Those are additional things that need to be considered. And that's kind of the path that we're looking at. Again, we don't have all the answers yet today, but that's what we're seeing.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Purcell.
Has the state engineer's office putting limitations on filling the dam reservoir?
Mr. Chair, yes. 5,475 feet is the pool surface elevation. That came out of the initial tech memo that said, hey, we have some problems here. I believe that's 15 feet, 12 feet below full. So yes, the state engineer's office has written a letter saying you will maintain this water surface elevation.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I can expand on some stuff.
Sit down.
One thing I just want to express my thanks to the commission for previous stuff, our level 1, our ongoing level 2 study. I thank you all for your considerations for all that. Our dam, I was hoping for a localized scenario so we can just retrofit that and move on. Unfortunately, it's global. I was there when we were inspecting it. I was not on the ropes. Travis Ford sitting over here, he was. This is the first time that it was inspected to this level. The state engineer's office, they've been on the dam numerous times inspecting one thing and another, but nobody's been on ropes to look at this. The 76 facelift that we done prior to, there'd been some fixes here and there, but even with that, you could see that there was some problems during that time. They fixed it with a slab. The state engineer, when myself and Phil spoke with them, they basically said, we'd sure like to see you have a gravity dam. That means filling it up with concrete. So ultimately, I think we're headed down the path of having a plan put in place so we can to be able to fill it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that said, do you believe that the 150 and the 500,000 additional, I mean, we should be able to do, if that's a determination or close to it, it appears like that's a lot of money to make that determination if you're that close.
Mr. Chairman, there's still some other things out there. With the engineers, I can't really get into the technical stuff of it, but we're going to have means of making sure that if that's the path that we go down, that it is a sound decision. Ultimately, we don't want to go after chase our tails, so to speak. So we want to make sure that what we do, there's still going to have to be some determination of the amount of work that goes into this, and the anomalies that they found, is that way clear across. There's still got to be some work done that way.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have no problem with the $500,000. Wait, to the extent that they spend the money, they're going to have to come back through contract amendments. We control the money and how it's spent. But I think at this time, we have one bite at the apple to get the money, and that's the legislative session. And this seems imminent enough that we need the flexibility to see what the future studies may come up with and react to them. And as I say, we're not giving the Pearl Irrigation District $500,000. We're giving ourselves $500,000 so that we can react to what the additional analysis and scope of services look like. And I, for one, have absolutely no problem with that.
Any other questions?
Chairman,
Representative Eckler?
I'd agree. I don't have any problem with it either, but you get into floor discussions and you need to be able to justify everything you're doing. When I first started 10 years ago, there were very few questions about either the omnibus bill or planning or construction. Now there's just a lot more discussion. We spend quite a bit of time, different folks wanting to know things about it. So now's the time. at least three of us here were scratching our heads on the engineering term filling it in. Are you talking about filling in these columns, concrete columns, so it'd be a solid dam all the way across this?
Mr. Chairman, yes, you're going to be basically filling in between the buttresses.
Mr. Chairman?
Any other question? Yes.
I think we have a couple over here. Go ahead.
Okay. I think this shows that there's a 28,000 acre feet possibility of storage, so what have you been knocked down to with the restrictions?
We're at 60%.
12,000 or so.
Correct.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, if I could. So I think I also heard that one of the options might be to totally replace that dam. Is that what I heard?
I'll let Travis forward with HDR.
Yeah.
Fault, we only got one one mic.
Okay, I came up to just mention the foundation to these guys, but your question was, what would it take to determine if it needed to be replaced?
I heard that was one of the options. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that will need to be considered. If you infill, for the foundation, there's differing, reports on that. One, the plan set shows alluvium underneath in the center of the dam, whereas some of the reports say a clay or a shale underneath. So some of the determination on whether you could actually infill or had to do more of a buttress effect or even replacing may depend on the foundation conditions.
So, follow up, Mr. Chairman. So if you choose to, let's say you choose to replace it, and then how does that affect the water rights below the dam? And is there a diversion option available to where you can do that? I assume there must be, but.
Sorry, Chase.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a diversion, but it'd be just limited to the amount of runoff that may occur during that irrigation system season. And it'd all be coming, there'd be no way to slow it down to store it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for these gentlemen at this time?
Doesn't sound good.
Sounds like it's a challenge, but I think you guys can get there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd add something, and that is that a question I had a long time ago when I came here is how do we determine these old structures, how good they are? Well, this is one of the ways we're doing it is in a study and a follow-up. So my guess is we're doing that all over the state because we've got a lot of 100-year-old structures that are still really sound is what I hear. The dams especially, we can't, if this thing breaks, it won't be replaced more than likely, the way the environmental community looks at things. So it needs to be repaired now.
If I could just offer up, this is a Amberson-style dam, and a lot of concrete dams, deteriorate. They look nasty, but they're big. They're massive, and they're infilled. An Amberson-style dam, you're looking at walls, right? So all the environmental deterioration that happens on that wall, there's a lot more surface area and a lot less thickness to that dam. So you're looking at thin walls that are deteriorating versus a large gravity structure that's deteriorating. You have a lot less safety factor there.
I do have one more question. So what's the potential long-term costs if you had to replace this dam?
Mr. Chair, I apologize, that's yet to be determined. Could be significant.
Mr. Chairman, isn't that part of the 500,000 is to look at the alternatives, cost them, and then pursue the one that makes the most sense, all the way from do nothing and tear it down to replace it. And there'll be a lot of options in between there. And that's the purpose of the 500,000. It's just like any level 2 study we've done on dams forever. What type of dam you're going to build and how you're going to make it safe and how you're going to divert the water around the construction. And that's the kind of questions we're asking the $500,000 for. And we just don't know right now, and that's why we need the additional funds.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to reiterate that the 500,000 that we came up with, that does not include any input from the engineers. It does not include a defined scope at this point. It's still fluid enough and new enough that we're not to that point yet. So the intent is to develop a scope in consultation with the engineers and develop the scope that maximizes the budget if we need it. But it's potential that we may not get as far as even knowing what the final answer is. We're trying to get down the road as far as we can and answer some of these questions.
Question, Mr. Chairman. So I'm curious, how many of these type designed reservoirs do we have in the state? It looks to me like a nightmare of forming. So all their cost was in forming and not concrete. Now then we end up probably putting in a bunch of concrete like they should have back in 1909. But do we have other ones built like this or similar design flawed? Because I would agree. It looks, now that you explain things, it looks like it's a flawed design.
Mr. Chair, I'm unaware of any other Emerson dams in the state. I don't know. Do you recall? There's very few, even in the country.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as we've understood, the Laparelle Dam is pretty unique, especially for Wyoming, and if nothing else, it's very unique as an Anderson-style dam in its height. That's somewhat unusual from what I understand. It is pretty unique. Yep, and on your remark about the construction, that you're right on with, as I understand it, at 1909, labor was very cheap and concrete was expensive, so the design really played to those to maximize the labor and minimize the concrete.
This Amberson Dam, Laparelle, it has reinforcing in it, but it has every other lift with reinforcing. So the quote from Amberson was, they never wasted a rebar.
And just so you guys are all aware, this is probably the nation's oldest open front dam, is this dam. Its twin sister lasted 10 years. This one's been 110. So, the old girl's done a lot for us. So with this extra money, we'll see what we can determine which direction is the best for it.
Any other questions on the Pirelli Dam? Gentlemen, thank you. Good luck with it. We'll look forward to your next report. Come back with some good news and we'll get her done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item of business here is University of Wyoming Water Research Program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will bring Mr. Greg Kerr up. If you remember in November, this was also a to be determined request. The reason for that is the applications for this, or the RFPs for this, were still coming in. The RFPs have been received and vetted, and Mr. Kerr can kind of give you a synopsis of what of that exercise was.
Mr. Chairman, My name is Greg Kerr. I'm the Director of the Office of Water Programs at the University of Wyoming and administrate the Water Research Program. In our November meeting, we presented to you 7 research proposals from faculty members at the University of Wyoming to deal with water-related issues in the state of Wyoming. Those 7 proposals at that time were going through our peer review process, which was completed, and our advisory committee then had deliberations on those peer reviews and their own evaluations of the projects. They then voted on projects. So if you see in your notebooks, each individual project is listed as it was in November, but at the end now of each individual project, you'll see where the advisory committee deliberations, a short little notation of what the committee came up with as far as scientific merit, its value to the state, and also evaluated the type of training that was available in each project for students. At the end of that section, then you see a table of the committee rankings. So all proposals were ranked from 1 to 7 by each of the individual committee members. Those rankings were then compiled and 3 distinct groups resulted that are shown in that table. The tiers are based on really a break in points from the individual proposals. So for instance, Tier 1, as you can see in this little write-up, Tier 1 and Tier 2, there was a 24-point difference between the average scores. And for between Tier 2 and Tier 3, there were 11 points. So there was a major point difference is why the tiers came about. So I'd like to concentrate on Tier 1. We had 3 projects in Tier 1. The first project was identifying, predicting, and managing the occurrence of harmful algal blooms in Wyoming reservoirs. This particular project addressed one of our RFP issues, is very important to the state. I'm sure most of you have heard about the algal blooms all over the state last summer, and this particular proposal wants to address and work with other state agencies in being able to study those algal blooms in the reservoirs. They're going to concentrate on Buffalo Bill. It was a popular area for recreation, and they feel that's one of the major areas that the state wants to concentrate on. So that proposal came out as our top proposal. Proposals D and E were close in the point rankings. Proposal D, robust low-cost snow depth measurements and high-resolution modeling to improve water supply forecasting in Wyoming. This particular project looks to identify through use of the Wyoming supercomputer, looking at modeling and on-ground smaller types of instruments that can help with snowtail measurements in order to identify better our snowpack and runoff, and ties in with information that was received for the weather modification study for the last 13 years, and be able to put that modeling within the Wyoming supercomputer and help with that forecasting tool. Those are the 2 that came out, 1 and 2. E was close. If you can see, as you can see in our write-up, the committee felt that the third one, in use of drones, may have some problems tying together some of the data and conditions in forested areas trying to use drones. And it just came out a little lower than the number 2 proposal. So those are the 3 I wanted to comment on. basically because the committee unanimously ranked those as 1 and 2 and wanted to recommend to the commission that those move forward for funding. Any questions?
Any questions on this project, on this proposal?
Chairman, so the requested budget is now for this, in the omnibus bill, what is it?
It's in the omnibus bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think if I remember correctly, what we did is we took the worst-case scenario of the top 3 tiers, so whatever was the most amount is what we put in the bill at that time, and that would have been the cost for C and E, which is roughly $447,000 is what's in the bill currently. Tomorrow you'll be making the approval of which 2 you would like, and to put in the bill for the final version. It could possibly be 3, but it could be any combination of those 3, such as C and D, which would reduce the amount that's in the bill currently.
Mr. Chairman, that's all well and good, but what we're hearing is the recommendation is C and D right now. Is that the one before us?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So the total of those 2 would be $445,683.
Any other questions for Mr. Kerr? Thank you for your presentation. Look forward to you tomorrow. Okay, our next item is project sponsorships, sponsors contingency fund, account 3.
Mr. Chairman, this project or fund establishment was generated as a suggestion by Select Water Committee at the November meeting, and it is behind tab H. There is a blue divider on the recommendation for the development of a sponsors contingency fund for account 3. Account 3 did not have a sponsors contingency fund, whereas accounts 1 and 2 have already established that. We have requested funding this account in the amount of $10 million. This was based on the active construction projects that we have funded right now, and then looking at those and determining where we see risk as far as construction costs going. And we determined that 2 of the 4 that we have funded, the contingency built in are probably adequate. So we looked at the remaining 2. The total cost, estimated cost for construction is about $100 million. So we just assumed a 10% contingency for what we have now to calculate the $10 million.
Part of the funds that we talked about on the LaPrelle Dam come out of this fund?
They do not.
Okay. Thank you. This is for other projects then, according to...
Mr. Chairman, yes, this would be for any account 2 projects, and the process would be similar to what we do in account 1 and 2, that if you bid the project and the prices come in above your estimate or what you had budgeted, then we can use this account to fund the project and get it going.
So this is besides the contingency that is built into the projects at the time that the cost analysis is created, correct?
That is correct.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Brandon,
Commissioner Purcell?
remind me, this appropriation has a 2-year life, and then it reverts. Are these contingency funds? Do they revert every, they have their own reversion dates?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we set the reversion date, I believe, in 2025.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this particular item? If not, we will move on to our Wind River Irrigation Rehabilitation 2015.
Mr. Chairman, this is an amendment to an existing contract. The reason it is coming up now and not in the November meeting is that the project was being bid in November. The reason for the extension is it is a time extension. As it was bid in November, the prices came in above the engineer's estimate. The desire is to rebid the project, but the reversion date would need to be extended, so the recommendation is to extend the project another 2 years. And if there are any questions, Mr. Mitch Cottonair is here, if you'd like to ask him any questions.
Any questions by the board? Any concerns on that end of the table? If not, we will proceed. The next
Mr.
item of
Chairman,
business.
if I may, one item that is not on the agenda that I would like to discuss. This is, again, kind of developing information. It has to do with the small water program and the project applications that we've got. I've got Jody Pavlika here. She's been crunching a lot of numbers. But in short, what we have determined is when we set up the original recommendations in November, we requested $1 million in funding for account 1 small water projects and $500,000 for account 2 small water projects. And this would be on top of money that is in the budget or in those budgets currently. So these numbers are factored in. To develop those numbers at that time, we projected that we would think 90 projects is what we would get. The application date was, I believe, December 31st.
January 1st.
January 1st, and we received 119 applications. So a considerable amount more than what we projected. To run through some of the numbers that are associated with that, I'll start with account 1. As I mentioned, our original request was for $1 million. And at that time, we estimated that we'd have about $835,000 left in the account. New numbers kind of indicate that we've got slightly over $1 million remaining in that account. So the applications that we received are requesting rough numbers, $2.105 million for account 1. And we had a budget, or we had, with the $1 million original request and the remaining amount, we had about $2,043,000. So what we're saying is that we are short with that recommendation to fund all of these projects an amount of about $62,100 in account 1. Account 2 is even worse. We'd requested $500,000 originally. We estimated it, and I think these numbers were revised, but we had about $252,000 remaining. So we were looking at an overall budget of $752,315. The requests that came in for account 2, the total number is $1,217,458, which would leave us about $465,143 short in that account. So I don't know what the commission would like to do. Jody, would you like to add anything, or did I cover it?
Of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I put my estimates together back in
October timeframe in order to get a forecast of the number of applications that I anticipate receiving on January 1st. And of course, at that time, the conservation districts themselves have not spoken with all of their constituents. So they themselves don't know how many applications they will be submitting. So you kind of have to take your best guess at what you think you'll see based on trends in the past and average grants appropriations that we've given in the past, and number of sponsors that I've talked to on the phone, and who you think you'll see, and watershed studies that are wrapping up. And I put all that together into a sort of a my best estimate, which is the numbers that you see at the November commission meeting. And then, of course, the application deadline is January 1st. This year, because this meeting is later, we had the opportunity to present the actual numbers to you. So you get to see that we had a very big year for small water this year. We just wanted to bring it to your attention.
I just have one comment. Is there a recommendation by the director for our shortfalls?
Mr. Commissioner, I think we've got two options. One would be to increase our recommended funding and apply it to all of these. The other avenue that we have not had time to look at, but that would be, we do have a priority system on these projects, and we could decide to limit at a certain priority level. We haven't vetted that out to see which projects fit in that, or even the amount of money that fit in that priority system under our guidelines for this small water program.
Are your priorities already determined, or would they on the priority list?
That is part of the program itself, and it
Okay.
is a...
So they're already pre-done?
Yes, I
Those
believe there are
priorities made.
6 criteria, or 6 for each account 1 and account 2 priority levels.
Yeah, 6.
Do you want to hear what the priorities are? And how?
I think so. I think at this time we should. If we're gonna have to vote tomorrow on these projects, I think we need to know today what they may be. Okay?
So the priority system that we have set up in the small water program has priority 1 through 6 for account 1 projects, and then priority 1 through 6 for account 2 projects, with an option to bring a project in at what we call shovel ready. And so the idea is, if you have your plans together, your specifications together, your money ready, all the permits acquired, and you are basically ready to start construction tomorrow, if everything's ready to go, and you can put the commission's money to work on the ground faster, then the commission has the latitude to give those people what we call a shovel-ready designation. So if you have a project that would normally be a priority 6 project or a priority 5 project, but you want to submit that project as shovel ready, the commission has the latitude to move that up to a number 1 priority. So I'll just put that out there for your consideration. The idea when we were building our system was that would give people who were ready to go the opportunity to get a number 1 priority, even though it would have normally been a lower priority project. So account 1 priorities, priority number 1 is source water development. So that would be like wells or putting new water on the ground. Priority 2 is storage. So that's if you're building a pond or a small reservoir. Priority 3 is pipelines, conveyance facilities, solar platforms. So that's sort of the appurtenances categories. Priority 4 is irrigation, and that category is pretty broad because a lot of our small water projects, we have more latitude at small water, so we have to consider the nature of the irrigation project and the public benefit associated with that project, so we define that category pretty broadly. Priority 5 is environmental. That is a very tightly defined category. That category is limited to stream channel restoration or anything that reduces erosion. in stream channels. And then priority 6 is our newest one, and that's recreation. The only difference with the account 2 priorities is that because the account 2 is just rehab projects specifically, the number 1 priority for the rehab account for small water is diversion structures and spring developments. So that's sort of the rehab account version of our source water development. And then the rest of those remain the same, only our irrigation priority would be number 4. It says irrigation other than the above. So that gives you sort of a handle on where the priority system lies. I will tell you that I haven't had time to do a very detailed analysis on all 119 applications yet. So I can tell you I have 119 applications, and I can tell you that this is where they break out for account 1 and account 2, but I can't tell you how many priority 5s and how many priority 4s we have, because that requires a much more detailed analysis than I've had time to put together at this time.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, only thing here, these applications, as Jody mentioned, this is late breaking news, obviously. January 1 was the deadline. She's had them about a week, and she's got a lot of vetting to do. Some of these, may fall out through our criteria, just aren't eligible, that type of thing. She's got to go through all these, but all these projects, the 119, will be before you in March. At the March meeting, that's where you'll take those up. Those 119, at that time, we'll have the prioritization in place. We'll have our recommendations, director's recommendations in place, and the sponsors will be here. So that at that time, so for tomorrow, we're just asking for a consideration of what should be done with the appropriation. Do we leave it as is? It was recommended at the November meeting when we didn't know the number of applications. We were doing it as projections at the 1 million for new development, $500,000 for rehab, or do we want to increase that, knowing now that we bust the bank if we were to fund everything, we wouldn't have enough. So those are the decisions we need to make now for tomorrow relative to the bill. What do you want to do with those appropriations? The projects themselves won't become before you until March. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I would leave the money the way it is and look at it in the March edition, because money's going to be tight down here during this session. I mean, we haven't seen it as tight as what it's going to be this next 2 years, so I would work it out and let the chips fall where they may.
Mr. Chairman, I'm similar. I am pleased that Shovel Ready gets the first priority, so to speak. I think that's good business, but I think we have criteria for a reason. Maybe limited funds. I'm particularly, 61,000, 62,000 account 1. Yeah, but account 2 is tight, and we're already squeezing that account to the point of no return. So I would really be reluctant to invest that much money in basically doubling the funds, isn't it? I would be in support of Mr. Geis's position and put you in the unenviable position of applying the very criteria to which you prepared.
Beauty of the system, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that you guys get the decision. I'll be happy to present you with the numbers in March, and then you have to make the tough choices.
Oh, really? I don't know if I get paid enough for decisions like that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Small water projects been a burning deal from the time they were created. A lot of people play on them like nobody's business.
I will tell you that I am pleased to see the interest in the program, and I have toured projects around the state, and I think we're doing a lot of good stuff, getting a lot of good projects put on the ground. So I'm happy to see that there is interest in the program, and I'm sure you'll get a chance to address the sponsors directly in March.
We just need to get our loan back, and we'd be fine, wouldn't we?
There we go.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would ask for some information maybe on what we've spent in the last 5 years on these projects, totals, and I think that'd be interesting. And I think last year we did not fund all of them anyway, did we, if I remember right?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we did fund everything, yeah. I have 2018 and 2019 with me. If you were looking for more beyond that, I'll have to get it. But in 2019 for account 1, we had $1,483,617,000 worth of requests. So we were able to fund all of those last year for account 1. And for account 2, we had $690,910 worth of requests. And so we were able to get all of those funded as well. And then in 2018, and the 2019 applications, that was 79 total applications. The 2018 numbers that I'm about to read you, we had 69 applications in 2018, and that amounted to $1,295,654 for account 1 requests, and we funded all of those. And then account 2 requests in 2018 amounted to $529,000, and we funded all of those as well.
So we've been pretty successful, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, thank you for your report. Any other questions?
No, the final say will be in that committee over there.
Yep.
No, we're gonna give them
We'll give them the
Well,
recommendation.
we'll give them a recommendation.
And they can kill it or go with it. But thank you for your report, very helpful. I had one other item, as long as we're talking about project applications, and I'm not sure that this is, not for you though, I'm sorry. It was dealing with our Tongue River, or not the Tongue River, but our Platte River allegation between, I think, the Colorado and Nebraska and Wyoming are involved in that pack. And we haven't heard anything. I don't know even if the commission here is responsible for the dollars that are going in, or I don't know where they're coming from. But there hasn't been any recent reporting on it, and I was just curious. And I believe that Harry probably is heading up that. Is that correct for the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. We've got a contract with Harry Labonte to serve as the state's liaison to the PRIP program. I can give you an update as I know it right now. I think we had some discussions about maybe getting Harry to a meeting to provide an update, and I think that would be good, and I can work on getting that done. But right before the end of the year, the first increment of the PRIP program was set to expire. There was a lot of work done. That first increment of the PRIP program was extended another 13 years. So there are several increments that are planned. This first increment, they didn't get the goals established that they'd wanted to. So the collective group, along with the Department of the Interior, made amendments to it to extend the first increment another 13 years. So the projects are still, the PRIP program is still going strong. There's been a lot of support for it. But I will work on getting Mr. Labonte scheduled to come to a meeting at your request.
Mr. Chairman, I might add, Congress, the reason you haven't heard much is the PRIP, the individual entities within the PRIP negotiated fair payment for each state. And then each state had to go get its funding for their share of the second increment. Wyoming's funds have already been appropriated. And I think 2 weeks ago, a week ago, Congress actually approved their 50% of the funding, and authorize the program for another 13 years. My memory is losing or going away quickly, but I think our share is in the neighborhood of 6%. And the other two states pay that, and then the feds pay 50%. So the reason you haven't heard much has been in Washington. And now that we do have approval, it would be a nice presentation. Basically, the argument for the first 13 years was which way was best to produce the habitat. When the program started, Fish and Wildlife Service had the bias that they needed 460,000 acre-foot a year from the states. We agreed to provide them, again, in the neighborhood of 130 to 150,000. Well, the state's position is you can develop habitat more economically and more efficiently with dozers and scrapers. And so that was the test that's been going on for 13 years, is which is the best way to develop the habitat. Fish and Wildlife Service saying water, state's saying dozers. Dozers are winning. So I would say while we had to provide more money, we're not providing any more water. And ultimately, this is the program that keeps the North Platte operating as it always has historically. So anyway, that's my 10-cent version, and Harry can elaborate on it far better than I. I've been out of the loop quite a while. Thank you.
I think that helps. I think we could, if Harry would be available for our next meeting, to come in and do an update. You know, I'd like to hear what it's about and where we're going. Maybe it'll give us a little bit of a message of what's happening. Okay, with that said, I guess there's...
Mr. Chairman, can I make one more point?
Sure.
Just because we have the money appropriated, they don't get it. I mean, we don't just send them $6 million. Every year or every month or whatever, we get invoices from them like any other contractor, and we review and approve them, and then we release part of we release our, if I'm right with the 6%, I'm assuming it's right, then we release 6% to pay those bills. This isn't just all of us sending a pot of money to the PRIP. It's controlled very carefully by all the signatories. So I think there has been some discussion that there wasn't the oversight on this, and that is not right. There is considerable oversight on the spending.
My question would be then, are we really constructing this today? Have we got dozers and scrapers running, or what are we doing?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there's been dozers and scrapers and habitat developed. Come to find out, the critters, particularly like sandbars around existing reservoirs. Now, if you've driven through Nebraska lately and you look right next to the interstate, you'll see where there's been gravel pits. Those gravel pits have filled with water, and there has been sandy beaches developed. And particularly the terns and plovers, they like that better than anything we could do on the river. So, you know, the science is getting us to a logical conclusion, but we're just not there yet. And there was a proposal for construction of a dam. And it basically, at last I heard, was on thin ground. It had real right-of-way issues. But we still have a little water to come up with to meet our goal. We haven't quite got there, and there might be water leasing, there might be land leasing, there might be land purchase, there might be water purchase, and there might be scrapers and bulldozers. So anyway, stay tuned.
Thanks for the report, Commissioner Purcell. Any other questions with that? So if not, we will move on to the legislative process and meeting request discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is kind of a personal topic for me on the agenda. As we're going into the legislative session, it's time for a good reminder. I'd really like to ask, and I'd appreciate that, particularly with this time of the year, that all the matters that concern our program, in our office, that the communication go through me, or at least have me included in any of the conversations that you may be having. I feel that we need to have a collective voice and messaging, and it will help me, as if I'm part of those conversations, to be able to defend and testify, and whatever questions may come up, that maybe I don't get blindsided if I'm kind of the point on some of these matters as we go through this process. I just ask that if you do receive an information request or any questions that do pertain to the office or the commission, that I be included in those and help develop the answers and the thought that goes into them. So I just like to make that request to you all, and I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I think it's a very valid request, and I respect it. Thank you.
Let the boss do the work.
Let you do the work, right.
Mr. Chairman, kind of a related thing that we've had, okay, you as a commissioner, you get approached from time to time from a sponsor, perhaps complaining about a consultant or a contractor or so forth, so on. And those during the project process, those should also be, call Brandon, tell him what you're hearing, what your thoughts are, and let him handle it. It's the same sort of thing. And Mr. Chairman, you'll understand this more than anything, particularly on a construction project. You have a pecking order for information, contractor to from their project manager to the engineer's project manager to the owner. And if we have them whipping around with some suggestions by commissioners, we had one case where, I won't get into details, but it was so bad that I was a consultant at the time, and Governor Friedenthal hired me to look into it. So again, construction process is a one-voice sort of thing. And I would hope that we can develop that relationship with Brian and Barry and Vern during all projects, that we can't leave them out of what you're hearing. And it's good you're there to hear, but we got to make sure that the decisions are all our decisions and not just the commissioner in the field. So I thought I'd add that on because it gets down. We used to have a workshop for new commissioners, and they've done away with it. But those were the kind of things that we had to relay about the do's and don'ts. Your authority rests here. Your authority is not necessarily kicking the tires on the scrapers. So, thanks.
I would respect that. That's a good thing to bring out. With that said, anything else? Any questions on that particular item?
Oh, thank you,
Finally,
Mr. Chairman, for
Joey?
your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I passed around a letter. We had a heck of a time trying to decipher the request from the Select Water Committee, but a letter was requested of us talking about the impacts of the diversions that have happened to the water development accounts. And
Here's your letter, Mike.
um,
You should have had a copy on top of your notebook. I've got additional if you would like one.
There's the next one, thank you.
So as your secretary, I drafted a letter. And I tried not to bite the hand that feeds us. But I think it does make some good background information about where we are with the program and how the diversions have impacted us. They've impacted us in the past, but they're starting to hurt us more now. Just for the fact that we've got so much going on. Hopefully I pointed that out and gave them some facts. I didn't say don't do it, don't divert the funds, but at least when you're having those debates, think of these facts in your consideration. Some of the diversions, $330 million, I would think that if the commission had come, they'd come to the commission and ask us to fund lawsuits, we'd say sure. So, and that is in the total. But most of the other diversions were for the operation of state government, budget balancers. For a time, Governor Sullivan took our interest for 4 years. So that total $330 million includes all that. Brandon has the details for those that want to see it. But that's quite a chunk of change. Granted, we've been around a long time, 1984, 83. I think the money, the original $113 million came in like 78, 79. But the request of us from, I believe, when we were from that side of the table at the November meeting was that they would like to see a letter outlining the impacts of the diversions, and this is our first attempt. And any commissioner should feel free to offer edits. And if we get the edits, we'll spiff it up, put it on letterhead, have our chairman sign it, and present it at Select Water Committee meeting on Friday.
Chairman.
100 minutes.
Thank you. Number one, I would like to see a more detailed report on the $330 million, and then the time frame. I'm hearing in the early 70s. Is that what I'm hearing?
Brandon, you can correct me, but I think that was when the program started, was the early 70s. I don't know when the diversions occur, but the tabulations can tell you that.
If we could get a little more detail about $330 million, I guess I would like that. We don't like the diversions either. We've been humbly supportive of most everything this commission's ever done. The last diversions that took place, we fought against. We didn't like them either. And we'll continue to do what we can to support the program.
Mr. Chairman, I see this letter as being ammunition for you to use any way you want.
That's what I was hoping it would be. That's why we're going to need more detail for it to be of any benefit to us to help defend the programs.
You, Senator, would like a breakdown of the 330?
Well, more than that. I mean, they're going to, if we use this, they're going to ask us where it is anyway. So we're going to need some sort of more detailed information than that.
My question is, do we have ample time to do this by tomorrow, the breakdown, the ammunition that they need, or should we leave the letter and acquire the information for them to make a determination of that's what they want? Does that work?
Mr. Chairman, I do already have some information prepared. Beyond what I have prepared as far as the level of detail will be tough to get in that short amount of time, and will likely be tough until I dig into the books and determine when and where those were taken. But we do have information, more detailed information on those diversions that I can bring.
We will continue to write the letter based on the information that you have, so that'll work. That'll work for Select Water.
Well, for me.
All right.
Here's the issue. We know the purpose of the diversion and the amount. We don't necessarily know, if you pinpoint this diversion, we don't know. I mean, like TMDLs. Once you take the money, we don't know what happened to it or a darn thing. And a lot of the names are so ambiguous, we can't even really tell you where they went. So he can provide the list, but be careful with it, because you know, they go to number 17, what is this? It take a lot of digging on most of these to figure out what the hell they were. So again, you got to remember, we're not responsible for, once you take it, we're done with it. That is why there is some hesitancy, I think, to provide you that, because they're going to ask us questions that we have no idea what the answer is right now. Brandon, you want to add to that?
I would just add too that we're without a fiscal manager right now, so to dig some of that stuff up gets even more cumbersome for me right now, and not knowing where that information lies. So the best I can offer you in the short term is the information that I have been provided. And I'd like to say thank you for the support that we do get from you guys.
Chairman, this goes way back to when Grant Larson from Jackson was chairman of appropriations, when they moved the part of the state engineers' money over, took it, and we took it out of our account and paid the state that side of the engineers. So you got to go back into the early 90s when they first started taking money or diverting it for different things.
Mr. Chairman,
and then we, later on, when I was chairman of the Select Water Committee, we put money in the budget to get our money back, and we got about half of it back, but we didn't get it all. And then this last time, it's been 2 or 3 hits in the last 4 or 5 years that they've hit our accounts and used it for general fund money.
Mr. Chairman, I would add that the $333 million identified in the letter is at least our best attempt to go back through the entire history of the program, and it does include what we have found through the history of the program.
Mr. Chairman, but you got to remember, these aren't general fund monies that come into this account. These are earmarked monies that come out of the mineral side of it that fund water development. It's not general fund money. And I don't know how they could transfer earmark money to different accounts. I'm not on appropriations anymore. I was there for 8, 9, 10 years, but I'm not there anymore.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Geis, I understand what you're saying, and I want to maybe remind you that I believe that we have received appropriations from general fund over the years too, for certain programs and certain functions as well. So it's not entirely, our budget has not been entirely set up with the mineral severance tax fund, but
some of that money they had taken first, and we were getting it back. They were paying it back.
that is my understanding as well, yes.
So,
Well, we got the letter and we'd go from there.
yeah. So you think it includes, you don't know, you don't think it's that much? Huh?
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that what you
yeah,
said?
I believe it's this much or
Okay.
might be more.
Okay. All right.
When you really go back and look at the apples and oranges.
So the homework assignment for the commission is to read the letter,
Yeah.
mark it up. We'll spiff it up any way you'd like. I would remind you, again, I'm trying in here to be as diplomatic as possible, because in fact, all we're suggesting is, if you have to do it, we just want you to know it affects us and impacts us. And I think that was at the heart of the request in the November meeting. So I hope we've complied with that request with this.
And we would entertain any help if you guys got an item in here that you want to indicate that you want in the letter also. We would accept that review, okay? With that said, if there's no other questions on the letter, we'll digest that tonight and make a decision in the morning and sign it and present it. Is that good enough for everybody? Let's do it. Thank you.
Well, it's gonna take more than just 24 hours to go back if you're gonna research the money that.
Well, here's what I think we can do at best knowledge, and we have best knowledge today.
Well, they
So-
should have a lot of it that they could dig up from former budgets when they go back through it.
Right, but I think we'll go ahead and write the letter. Do you agree with
yeah.
that, Purcell?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, and
Based on the element.
I'll let Brandon veto me, but I have no problem, at least as a commissioner, giving them the tabulation we have, with the caveat, if you want more than that, it's going to take time. And maybe quite a little time, given the fact that the lady that generated it, we lost two great employees over the last month, and it's hurting us right now. Poor Brandon had to go to appropriations without a fiscal control officer. He and Jason. So we're paddling through it, and we'll get there.
With some luck, we'll make it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I just might add, we understand the situation. We're as frustrated over the recent actions of JAC robbing those accounts. We weren't a bit happy any more than you were. We'll do what we can.
And we'll present what we have. That's fair.
That's all you can do.
That's all we can do. Thank you. Any other questions on the letter? If not, we will proceed to an executive session to receive legal advice. Is that our next item in business?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, and I have no further business following the executive session, so this will be the last item that, at least from my perspective, on the agenda today.
Thank you. So we will kind of adjourn our meeting and we'll go into the executive session.